webinar is now live.
It is. So
Yes.
to all our viewers, we're just going to give a few more minutes because before everybody joins.
Good morning, Snehal Sharma. Namaste to you and everybody else in India. A few of our UX, I say good morning, Dishant and Amit and Akash. Hope you're all well there in India. And Shankar enjoying the rains. I understand a lot of rains going on in Ahmedabad at present. Is there, Rishmita?
Yeah, no, it has been pouring lately. Okay, guys, I think we have almost 28 people with us right now and more are coming in. But I'm going to just begin and have everybody come in.
Couple of familiar names. Good morning, Rick, and good morning, Sid. Coming up on my chat box.
Okay, so Rahul, should we begin now? Are you ready?
Yes, please. We are okay to go live.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. I'm Rishmita, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to QX and ACCA's first collaboration webinar on the leadership in the new normal. Today's webinar is all about understanding the requirements of the new normal and how many accountants in leadership positions can lead their teams and firms successfully into this post-COVID-19 times. Today we have with us QX Global Group's founder and chairman, Chris Robinson. Chris founded QX, which is India's first GDPR-compliant outsourcing firm. He came to India in 2002 and fell in love with the culture and the highly qualified and talented workforce. 17 years later, Chris's 5-member startup has now flourished into an outsourcing empire with 1,300 plus members in his QX family. Chris is widely regarded as a pioneer in the accounting and recruitment outsourcing field and a global entrepreneurship, and his business is now geographically scattered across UK, USA, and India. Chris is also a firm believer of how change is the only constant. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rishmita. Namaste to all in India. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We also have with us ACCA's Head of International Development, Mr. Mohammed Sajid Khan. Sajid has been with ACCA for over a decade now, and he looks after projects that develop and sustain the accountancy profession here in the country, working with partners and other stakeholders to meet the demands for professional accountants growing across growing economies. Currently, Sajid's primary focus lies on leading ACCA's strategy in India and how it can contribute to the rapid development of the Indian economy. Hi, Sajid, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Rashmita. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Well, just a few housekeeping tips before we begin the webinar. The webinar will be 45 minutes long with a Q&A session for the audience in the end. It is a very interactive webinar, so we'd like you to get involved. If you've got questions, drop them into the chat box on the right, and we will pick them up during our Q&A session in the end. Great, so now that we've been introduced and the housekeeping's been run through, I think we should get started. I will now hand over the webinar to our host and moderator, Rahul Puri, who is ACCA's Head of Employer Relations, to take it from here. Well, over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Rashmita, and good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be able to have this conversation on a very interesting topic on leadership, and have Chris and Sajid both talk about, as they are leaders of the current as well as the future generation. So I'll just start with a bit of a context of really what's happening in about a couple of lines. And what we really see is that from technology to demography, the global economy is entering a new era. And we all know that further, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to businesses and business leaders look at newer ways of working and leading. So my first question to Chris is, as a leader, how have you responded to the current situation, and what changes have you seen in this new normal, Chris?
Good question, Rahul. Well, I suppose the biggest impact that we've seen and the biggest change is actually the lockdowns. Up until this year, we took freedom of movement for granted, but this year we've been restricted like we've never been restricted before. In India, we had 5 offices. We had 1 office in the UK and we had 1 office in the US. So we've got offices in Ahmedabad, Baroda, and Mumbai. We now have 1,300 offices because all our employees are working from home. Now, we're an outsourcing company, so our staff are already used to working remotely. And we also have good processes in place, and we have the right technology. And what I mean by the right technology is we were virtually completely paperless, and we use a high degree of automation. So lockdown wasn't a huge logistical challenge for us, except for we had to relocate 1,300 staff to home. And we had a tremendous help from that from our BCP team. Of course, we're a global business, so we have clients in both the UK. Not only do we have offices in the UK and the US, but we've got clients there. And all our client staff were suddenly working from home because they had lockdowns in both those countries. And most of our clients were used to working with us remotely, but weren't used to working themselves remotely. But they've adjusted very, very quickly for that. Some took a little longer than others, but with our help, now all have. And of course, as we know, that happened very, very quickly. We were pretty much had less than a week's notice to get everything in place. So although we can't physically visit our clients, we still keep in regular touch with them, because now with modern technology, we've got Skype, we've got Zooms, we've got Teams. So we're still meeting with our clients in a virtual manner. In fact, we find we're actually meeting and having more contact with them, because our managers and our BD executives are actually spending less time traveling. On a personal front, as my staff who know me, I probably spent 6 months in a year traveling, spending time in India 4 or 5 times a year, traveling to the UK and going to the US. And as a business, we would have 20 to 50 staff traveling at any point in time. And with global travel bans and the lack of flights, again, that's been made impossible. We were very lucky that the first thing we did when we saw trouble coming is that we brought all our staff home, and we were lucky we just got them back in time. I suppose the final point I'd like to make, and the other big change that we made, is our communication. As a board, we now meet weekly rather than monthly. Our senior leadership team, we already had weekly meetings, and again, we do these virtually. But now our first topic on them is our BCP and our BSP, which is our business sustainability plan. They're the first topics we discuss. And the final part about our communications is that we have now a a weekly town hall. In fact, we have 2 towns hall every week because we have people working different shifts. And every QX site, which is what we call people who work for us, has access to those. The board and the SLT present every week. It's a question and answer session like we have here. And we explain what our plans are and how we're progressing and how the business is developing. And anybody can ask a question, and every single question is answered. So there's actually been a huge increase in communications and transparency. Couple of other little things is we've had to put a furlough scheme in place, which is the first time that we've had to do that to help. We had a couple of ramp downs on clients. And we've also set up a wellness centre because it's all trying to get used to this new normal of all being remote. But even though we're all further apart now because of the lockdowns, I feel in a sense we've been brought closer together.
I agree. The importance of being together and the importance of being able to virtually connect with each other has gone a lot more. Has taken us to the next level. Well, talking about the new normal, Sajid, I'd like to point the next question to you. That the very fact that the leadership has now been more important, during these in uncertain times, the aspect of leadership has never been so important. What does this mean for leaders and everyone else in the organization? If you could share some views.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul, for another great question. And I would like to begin with setting the context and explaining exactly what you've asked for, which is what is leadership in the new normal and what does it actually mean for all of us on this call, whether we have a title or not as a leader. As we know that we are all going through very challenging times and times which we have never seen before. And as business leaders, we're all looking at how do we not only survive but thrive in these challenging times. And thinking about it, I just came across one article in McKinsey in May on the same topic, which is from surviving to thriving post COVID-19. And in this article, they have shared a very interesting story of Brazilian soccer. So what happened in 1966 World Cup is that the Brazilian team was eliminated in the first round, although they were the winners of the previous 2 World Cup tournaments. And the star player Pelé failed to perform. And seeing all these people felt that, that the glory days of Brazil are over. But what happened in the next World Cup, which is 1970, surprised everyone. Not only Brazil won the World Cup again, but with grace and style. And that 1970 team was considered to be one of the best teams ever in Brazil. And of course, Pelé was named the star player of the tournament. Now, people try to find out, discover what exactly has helped Brazil to have the strong turnaround. So they have discovered 3 things. One was innovation. They came with a, entirely new attacking style of soccer. That was the first one. And secondly was the cohesive team. Although even though there were several new players, but they had a very cohesive team. And finally, the third one, which is most important, was that leadership at all levels, in management, on the field, and by everyone. I think as we all now aim to, recover from this difficult times, there is some food for thought for all of us from this Brazilian story. And we all need to look at innovation. In fact, we are all doing this. We need cohesive teams, more so because we are working from homes. We are no more, in the same room as we used to be. And of course, what we also need is leadership at all levels. And I would like to go a bit more deeper into this, what I exactly mean by leadership at all levels, which is, I think, is more important now in these current times. And to explain this, I would like to take another story by Robin Sharma in his book, Greatness Guide. He has shared a story, his own story, that he was traveling on business to Moscow, and where his the handle of his carry-on luggage broke. So on coming back to his base town, Toronto, he went to the agency Avex, which he got the luggage from. He got it fixed. He got it repaired. However, after a while, when he went for another business trip to New York, unfortunately, that handle broke again. And this time he went to the agency in New York, but he didn't have any proof of purchase or payment receipt from the previous, repair. But still he went ahead and wanted to try and went to the agency and explained to the lady at the counter what the problem is all about. So the lady, she apologized for the inconvenience caused and said and assured him that the handle will be fixed in 2 days' time. And she did not ask any question, nor for any bill. So Robin goes on to share that how impressed he was with this service of this lady at the counter. And he says that she showed true leadership. She quickly diagnosed the problem, assumed personal responsibility, and took the right decision. And I think what we need to keep in mind that she wasn't the owner, she was not a supervisor, she was not the manager. She was just a leader without a title. I think this is something we all need to keep in mind. And this is what exactly I tell all my colleagues, that no matter whatever role you are in, maybe you are a head of a department or maybe you are just at executive level, but whatever you do, maybe you send an email, you talk to someone, external person, they all see your company in you. So you represent your company. And hence it is very important for all of us to act as leaders. And this slight, change in the mindset makes a huge difference in our performance. And in his, Robin Sharma has another book, Leader Who Had No Title. In his, he says that every single teammate is the CEO of their own small business unit. And that business unit is their job. So I think this is the time now for all of us to be demonstrating leadership at all levels, more so in these difficult times.
Thank you, Sajid. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Yeah. This wanted to underline the importance of this leadership at all levels in these challenging times, which is the need of the hour. Thank you, Rahul. Over to you.
Thank you, Sajid. And sorry, I wasn't aware that you were just about to finish off and interrupted.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you. No, you really bring up a very good point about leadership at all levels, and everyone being the CEO of their own job. I think that drives a lot of ownership and responsibility among people, which a lot of employees do thrive on. So I'll move on to Chris on this interesting point to say that Sajid just talked about leadership at all levels without the need for a title. Interestingly, you have also spoken about this in your article, where you've actually mentioned that I consider each one of my clients and the 1,300 employees as leaders who are involved in making informed decisions for ensuring the safety of the businesses, their family members, and their communities. So I'd like to ask you, what do you expect these clients and your employees to do differently as leaders with or without a title?
Well, firstly, let me say I concur exactly with what Sajid has just said. At QX, we're a global service provider. So our how we enable our clients to transform, and we put together solutions which help them transform their businesses. And we always say we do that with people, processes, and platform. So it's people, processes, and platform in that order. We put people first. And COVID-19 is attacking the world. It's damaging world economies, businesses are being affected, people are losing their job. But most importantly, it's killing people. In the great crises that we've had in the past, they haven't really, certainly in my lifetime, they haven't involved people actually dying. And we will beat COVID-19, there will be a vaccine, there will be a treatment, the world economy will recover, and people will get back to work. That will happen. But people have to survive to get the benefit from that. And there will be a big benefit after, but there's no recovery from death. So to survive, we need to put people first. And because COVID-19 was so infectious, our offices, which are normally that safe and secure environment, have now become a hazardous environment to have large groups of people bringing people together. So before COVID-19 ever before it took place, we as the QX board and our clients' boards that we speak to would have never have thought of having those 1,300 offices and having 1,300 offices working from home. Now we have all these autonomous business units, whereas Sajid said each one of them is a CEO in their own home. And all our clients, and a big kudos to them, have accepted that as the new normal. And all our staff have accepted it as the new normal and taken on that responsibility. So they've all become leaders. And the most important thing I think about being a leader is being a role model. It's having that discipline. It's being somebody that people look up to and respect. And if you think of what our big crisis is at this point in time, it's to protect yourself, your family, and your friends. And there are three very simple rules, and this is a message we repeat in our town halls every week to our staff. It's to self-isolate, to socially distant and do permanent hygiene until we get a vaccine and a cure. And it's very tough to do that on a consistent basis. We've been in this lockdown for quite a long period of time now. You know, several. We thought it was initially going to be 3 weeks. It's now been past 3 months. We're going into 6 months, and there's no real end to it as far as we can see. But to date in QX, we've had very low cases of COVID-19. And that's because each one of our employees has been very disciplined. And it's that leadership that each person has shown, not just within their environment, but within their family, within their societies and their communities. And I think that's how you become a leader. You're a role model. You understand what the rules are, and you show leadership by example.
Thank you, Chris. I do like the word role model because that's something that really encourages people to show the best of when they're in a team environment. And of course, you know, people want to look up to each other when it comes in the scenario of a new normal or a pandemic. So Sajid, having heard from Chris on how everyone could demonstrate leadership, in your opinion, what are some of the essential attributes for a leader in the new normal? And it'll be great if you could also put some light or throw some light specifically on what this means for finance and accountancy professionals, please.
Sure, Rahul. I think Chris has already touched upon a few of the attributes, being a role model and showing the resilience, showing the discipline. I'd like to just add more to that. Of course, there are some attributes which are very critical for leadership every time, but more so in these difficult times. One, of course, is the clear vision. In difficult times, people need clear, inspiring vision from the leaders for two reasons. One, it gives employees a confidence in the future. And that number two, that it allows employees to align their goals and behaviors with the success of the vision. So it's very important to have that clear vision. And secondly, what differentiates leaders from others is the accountability and responsibility. Leaders don't wait for someone to do something about a challenge or issue. They own the responsibility and do something about it. And I think what also differentiates leaders is that they take responsibility for the condition of their organization, even when the external factors impact it. For example, now, the factors beyond their control, but even then, leaders take up responsibility of the condition. So I think this is what all leaders and all of us should be, looking into. And one thing which Chris has already mentioned about is communication. Transparent communication is very, essential. And Chris also mentioned about, the consistency and frequency of the communication and honesty. So this is all required, especially to build trust in these difficult times. And of course, he also talked about, keeping people's first, having that empathetic approach, listening to employees, listening to customers, their fears, pains, and frustrations, and not only listening, but doing something about it. So leaders need to walk the talk. So I think these are the few, qualities which leaders need to show in this, as always, but also more so in these challenging times. And Rahul, you talked about, especially on finance leaders as well, what they need to have as attributes. For this, I would like to refer to our own ACCA's report, which we produced about 3 years ago, where we were looking at, the report says, the title of the report is Professional Accountants for the Future, Drivers of Change and the Future Skills. So we were looking at, thinking ahead, what skills and competences will the professional accountants will need to have in this increasingly complex environment that we are in. So that report has identified 7 skill set, or we say quotients. We call them professional quotients. And I'll be sharing very briefly those 7 quotients, which I'm sure people on the call will be interested in knowing what those quotients are. And the interesting thing is that, although we identified this as the future skills, but these skills are now very relevant to this current time that we are in. So the first quotient, the first and foremost, of course, at the core of what a professional is the technical and ethical competencies, which is of course core. Everyone needs to be technically and ethically sound in their role. But then moving on, the next quotient that we have identified is the emotional intelligence. And we just talked about, how important it is for leaders and everyone to connect with their colleagues, connect with their clients. So for that, we need to have that emotional intelligence. The next quotient is creative quotient. Of course, we need to be creative in these challenging times. How do we, reform our business? How do we make changes? How do we reimagine our business? So we need to be creative. Moving on, the next quotient we identified was the digital quotient, where we say that not only the professional accountants need to be savvy with the tech savvy and need to be aware of the current technologies, but also with the emerging technologies they should be well aware of. And moving on, the next quotient is experience quotient. And the last 2 questions are, one is the vision. Then we talked about having the clear vision, how important it is for the leaders. And finally, the last one is the intelligent quotient. So again, leaders need to have intelligence where they should be able to, apply the knowledge and skills they have in problem solving, critical thinking. And this applies more so in these current times. So these 7 areas, or I can say quotients or attributes, I think, Rahul, are very critical for finance leaders, but I think even for other leaders as well.
Thank you, Sajid. I think the 7 professional quotients that you mentioned, I think a lot of us would have heard of quotients such as digital, because everyone is talking about digital. I'm sure that everyone has also heard of being technically and ethically equipped and sound. But there's something very interesting that you mentioned, which is on emotional intelligence. So my next question to Chris is that in what Sajid just referred to as attributes such as accountability, responsibility, empathy, the 7 professional quotients, he also spoke about emotional intelligence. Now in 2018, ACCA did a survey called Emotional Quotient in a Digital Age, where we actually talked about the importance of having a growth mindset. And I'm focusing a little more on this specifically because in your article on crisis leadership, you've also spoken about growth mindset. So why is this so important, and is this related to the need for learning about self in an individual?
Absolutely, it is, Rahul, and I think they're great 7 questions that you've posed there, and that every future leader should be taking that self-survey. I think first we've got to understand what the 2 types of mindset are. there's the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And the people with a fixed mindset believe that their talents are innate gifts. They say, I am what I am, and it is what it is. And I'm sure we can think of one leader in the world who very much believes he has innate talents. He is the best in the world. He knows more than anything else. And that's a country that's really struggling with COVID-19 at the present moment in time. There's another mindset, and that's the growth mindset. And what you understand, what people with a growth mindset, they understand that skills can be enhanced and transformed through training, learning, and development. They're people who understand what I am now, but what can I become? It's not what it is, what it is. If that's what it is, then how can I change it? And you can only do that if you have a growth mindset. Now at QX, we have a value-based culture. We call it our precise values. And the S in precise stands for self-awareness. And those 7 questions that you said there, are just the typical type of questions that people should be asking themselves about where do I stand on those scales? Where do I understand on those quotients? Because those are the skills that you require to be a successful leader and a successful accountant in the new age. But nobody got to where they were going by staying still. And if you believe you've got a fixed mindset and you are what you are, you can't grow. If you have a growth mindset, you can grow and develop. And at QX, we've developed a digital performance management system that's based on our values management system. Our HR and our IT team have worked together. It is bespoke and tailored for us. All our managers and BU heads have worked together, and that's called QX Me. And what QX Me does is help each individual QX site understand where they are, and then it enables them to learn and to develop and be what they can become. And we just launched it recently over the last months, but we really see this as a valuable key tool in enabling people to develop that growth mindset and actually grow and develop in the business. And that's absolutely essential for us in this new changing world and this new changing dynamic, that our employees continue to grow and that our leaders continue to grow, because as we said right at the very start, we live in very challenging times and changing times. So very important that that everybody really focuses on that self-awareness and how can I improve and how can I make myself better.
Thank you, Chris. So you mentioned the word self-awareness, and I think change really starts from within. So it's once you start becoming more aware of yourself, I think that change from within really starts from that point in time. So just carrying on with what you recently mentioned, that there is a digital system that you've also put in place. So as we talk more about the need to learn about self or become better leaders, there is also an ulterior need of upskilling. So you definitely need to keep upskilling as you go higher up in the ladder, or if you want to upskill yourself from a knowledge standpoint. So, Chris, do you think investing in acquiring skills, more importantly, digital skills, because you also mentioned that there is a digital system in place at QX, is becoming a more prominent need in the area of finance and accountancy as a profession? And how do you think you're investing in a culture or driving a culture of learning within QX? If you could share a few examples.
Yeah, okay. Well, like Sajid, I've been reading the ACCA website, and while I was going through that, I was reminded from very distant in my past one of the first things, the 5 fundamental ethical principles set out in the ACCA rulebook. I'm sure all the accountants are quickly scrambling through their heads to remember them. but we obviously know integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and professional behaviour. But the last one is professional competence and due care. And that excuse me while I just read this out. It's to maintain professional knowledge and skill at a level required to ensure that a client or employer receives competent professional service based on current developments in practice, legislations, and techniques. So for all as accountants, this is a professional duty of care that we have to keep up to date. When I started 35 years ago as I was originally a chartered accountant and went on to become a certified accountant, I would consider myself to be very computer au fait. I was very lucky. I was part of that early computer generation. I knew how to use 3 pieces of software. I could use a word processor. I could use spreadsheets, or accountant's favorite tool, and I could write reports in databases. I've never really got to fully grips, although we're using them in accounting software. But as I say, I was considered to be fairly literate then. Today's accountants need to be far more computer literate. We at QX have a tech stack wheel where we've identified 12 of the most common processes that our accountants and our clients use, just in a standard normal business or practice. Each one of them processes on our tech stack wheel, we have 2 to 5 different softwares. So all the accountants in the world are pretty low, but a typical QX accountant has to be competent in 20 to 60 digital platforms. And so when I started, we had 3. Look how it's changed in sense of magnitude. Now, a lot of those have got similar transferable skills, but that's how competent people have to be. And this is why digital skills are so important. And at QX, how we're driving that culture of learning. Well, again, QXMe is a performance management system. It's also linked to a training system. It's actually tailored for each individual QX site so that we identify what their goals are, where they're looking to go to. And it helps them focus, both them and us as leaders, to focus on their individual learning and development needs. On top of that, we have our in-house learning and development team. They work with our individual QX sites. We monitor individuals' progress on a real-time basis with regular reviews. We have a dedicated in-house team of trainers. We also run a QX Academy, which I know you are aware of, and that was set up with the goal for us to provide accountants for the future. Because of our growth and the need for accountants in the world, we have a goal of training 1,000 fresh graduates into accounting professionals over the next 3 years. And the students within that are paid QX employees. They're trained in both the theoretical and practical accounting skills. And we also train them right from the off on the most up-to-date digital platforms. And then I suppose the final thing I'd like to talk about, which is very relevant to our ACCA members, is that we also sponsor any of our accountants who meet our qualifying criteria to pursue their ACCA qualification, and I'd heartily recommend anybody doing that. It's an excellent qualification. We cover the costs of the study, we help them with the study material, and we cover the costs of the exam fees. So I think the ACCA, and a young friend of my son has just completed an accountancy degree, and I was advising him. I can think of no real better course of action than taking ACCA, as it's a tremendously strong global qualification that will stand him in good stead for the rest of his life.
Thank you, Chris. Really insightful. I think you spoke about the use of two to five different softwares that the team internally focuses on while delivering some of their end projects for clients, and you emphasize on the need for understanding digital skills because that's something that everyone is talking about nowadays. So I'll flip another question over to Sajid. Sajid, in this digital world that we are now living in, how does one make a future which is proof in a way? How does one become future proof? What are the skills required to develop a career in finance? And what do you foresee as some of the future roles and responsibilities that are now going to emerge in the area of finance and accountancy because of the so many changes coming into the technological landscape?
Thank you, Rahul, for another great question. And I think Chris has already touched upon a few of these things, where he talked about professional competency, as he has highlighted that importance of the professional competency, again, which includes, various other skill sets. So the report which I referred in the earlier, response, which is professional accountants of the future, that report, besides the 7th question, also identified that the professional accountants for the future, if they have to be, future proof and be demand always, they need to be forward looking, strategic thinkers, having a blend of both business and finance skills. And more importantly, they need to have good communication skills. So this was very clearly highlighted by the report. And of course, we talked about, and Chris also mentioned about the digital skills, and we talked about digital quotient, which is very critical in this age. And our report, another report, the digital accountant, clearly, underlines the fact that the whatever generation we are part of, digitalization is something that we need to be part of. It gone on the days where people used to say that it's only for the tech savvy new generation that they need to be. It's not the case. Everyone needs to be part of digital age. Now, in the same report, we have also identified that the leaders now realize that being digital is a people problem, not a technology problem. Because technology can be, sourced and it's everywhere it's available. But what is now required is, more of, as you have rightly said in the previous question, Rahul, is about upskilling and reskilling is required. So that continuous focus needs to be there on, upskilling yourself with the current technologies, emerging technologies. That is very critical if you want to be in demand going forward. And when we talk about future career opportunities and options, again, we have another report, very interesting report. And just to let everyone know that my colleagues will be sharing links to all these reports that I'm referring here. So one report which we produced this year is Future Ready Accountancy Careers in 2020s. That means we are talking about careers in this decade that we are in. That report has identified 20 interesting trends in careers in accountancy. Of course, I won't be able to go through all the 20 trends in the interest of time, but I just want to highlight few trends which may be of interest to you. One is that, of course, automation. It talks about automation, which is going to free up professionals so that they can do more higher value work going forward. And one trend has identified that generation next, a new tech-savvy generation will enter the profession. And the other interesting trend it has identified is that with the rise of gig economy, there will be like rent a CFO concept. Even this is now available right now. And I think more importantly, the other trend which we have identified was that the career progression will be beyond the usual lattice. So career paths will be less obvious and more variable. People will be moving laterally within the organization because of this, changing business environments and the opportunities that are coming across. And also we have identified that the CV will be a thing of the past, rest in peace, because future CVs will focus on skills attained and not on job titles acquired earlier. So these are the few of the trends. I'm sure you'll be interested in knowing more about it. I would urge you to, if you'd like to more about the future trend in accountancy careers, I would urge you to go and have a look at that report. The report, of course, identifies the main fact that this is a decade of opportunity. There are several drivers of change around us. We are seeing, globalization, digital technology, and now we see COVID. But of course, these drivers of change, they do pose challenge, but they also give us opportunities as well. So we have to be positive, and it is a decade of opportunity for professional accountants. Just we need to have the right skill set.
Thank you, Sajid. Really insightful and very focused in terms of what the future of a professional accountant and opportunities for in the area of finance are coming through. And I'm sure that all the attendees would be really keen to look through some of these reports that you've mentioned and reference to. I'm just conscious of time, and I know that this has been a very, very engaging discussion for everyone. But before we close and rather invite more questions from the audience, Chris, Sajid, any final words of advice for emerging leaders who are listening into this webinar right now?
Shall I go first, Sajid?
Yes, please.
First of all, following on from Sajid's point, both Sajid and I are probably older than most of the participants in today's meeting. I have, and for many, COVID-19 may be your first crisis that you've experienced. We haven't had one in probably the last 10 years or so, in your working lifestyle. But because I'm old, certainly I've experienced 4 or 5 of these crises in the past. But the world has always survived the others. Now, just to put this in perspective, COVID-19 is a big one. It's certainly been the toughest that I've experienced, and it's certainly been the toughest that a lot of people will experience. It's not as tough as we've potentially had in the past. To date, it's nowhere near as bad as the 1918 Spanish flu or the severe depression of the 1930s, or as bad as the 2 world wars. But even those great crises, the world survived. And after we got past those crises, the world thrived. There was always a growth, business and an economy. So there was, as Sally just said, where there was a threat, there becomes an opportunity. And there is a tremendous opportunity for all our growing leaders. And my sort of final words of advice is, first of all, survive. Follow the rules, keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, and use this time to prepare, develop that growth mindset, and prepare for the growth and the opportunities that are to come. And I had a couple of points on the global trends, but I'm not going to go through them because I'm conscious of time, and the ACCA have done a good report on this, so I suggest you go and read that report.
Thank you, Chris. So I just want to add to what you have already mentioned. So you have given a good advice on surviving, and I would like to just extend that and say that not only survive but also thrive with the growth mindset that you have just mentioned about. And I would like to advise that please be positive. And I like one very good saying that that never fear shadows. Never fear shadows. They simply mean there is a light shining somewhere nearby. So I think we need to look for that light. I think we have heard a lot of great ideas on this call today, but I think my only advice would be for you to take some action on the takeaways that you get from here. And they say that getting started is half done. So however small, but we need to take a step now. And otherwise, I feel that if we don't act now, we will all be subject to something called law of diminishing intent, which was first given by Jim Rohn. The law says that, the longer you wait to do something you should do now, the greater the odds that you will actually never do it. So let's resolve today to show that leadership at all levels in our own roles in these challenging times, and make the best possible contribution to your own life, to your company, and the society as a whole. that's my advice. Just wanted to leave you with that.
Thank you, Sajid. Thank you, Chris. I do have a couple of questions which have popped up in the Q&A box, and I'll read out the same. So the first question is, what kind of digital innovation should a leader adopt in order to lead their team successfully through these times of remote working? Chris, can I invite you to answer that question?
Well, I think, as I said, right, the thing that we have done, and I think that probably the most essential tool that we have is communication, and the digital tool. So as we are here, where we're computing, there is Zoom, there's Skype. We're extensively using Teams now, and Teams is a fantastic way of communicating with your team. It's an integrated package. There's several others, so I'm not sort of saying about one particular one, but I would advise that is really the first step. If you're a leader and you want to be able to communicate with your team, that you need to communicate with them and do that on a regular and transparent basis.
Thank you, Chris. So the second question is more of the first part is actually a comment, and it's followed by a question. So I'll just read this out. Great session and great insights received. First of all, thank you, Chris and Sajid, for such an insightful session. The qualities that you described on leadership comes naturally to some and not to others. Any tips on mentoring aspiring young leaders? I'd probably request Sajid to add his views on this piece.
Certainly. Thanks for asking that question. Yes, the good news is that all those skills and attributes that we have talked about can be acquired, can be developed. But I think in terms of what we need to do as leaders is do a bit of both mentoring and coaching as well, a mix of both. Because we just, in terms of coaching, we need to help them reflect on what needs to be, what they can do differently going forward. For example, I always tell my managers that when anyone comes to you with a question, the answer could be another question to them. Instead of telling them, and I believe in a saying that you give a man a fish, you feed him for the day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for the life. So following that principle, I think that coaching is required. Tell them what exactly, how they can help themselves, help the team. So I think a bit of coaching and mentoring can help them to acquire these leadership skills and develop the leadership skills. And again, there are various levels of leadership skills, and there are a lot of resources available which they can use it.
Thank you, Sajid. We'll just have one more question before we wrap up today. And I'm now beginning to actually get a lot more questions, but I'll just pick up one more. So there's this interesting question, which is, while the workforce adjusts itself to the new normal and starts using all the technology to efficiently work from home and deliver, as a leader of a company, how do you make sure that the employee morale stays high? And with everything moving to digital, how does a leader ensure that the team bonds and the employee spirit and the company core values are well taken care of? Maybe Sajid and Chris, I'll invite both of you to share examples and anecdotes on this specific question.
Sure, Chris, you want to go?
Well, that's a great. Yeah, well, that's a great question. We can talk for another hour on that one. I'm sure. I think within any, one point about being a leader is about a role model. But again, coming back to that point that we said right at the very start about how can everybody contribute to being a leader. I think another great role that anybody with or without the title can play is being a cheerleader. And actually being supportive wherever you are, supporting supporting the company, but supporting your colleagues. There's an awful lot of new skills and new technology. I think that was what the question, that it can actually be overwhelming, all the things that actually happen. So once you have to work as a team, you have to pull the team together. And as I said, having the communication and having a good communication software to do that. But it's also to delegate and to trust and to pass different people, different roles. And we, as I say, we had 1,300 people that we need to get to work from home. We had a team of 15 working on that because we were a large organization, all from different disciplines. But into that, we had people that we delegated it down with, and we give people to do it. So when something seems overwhelming, the best way to deal with it is, you know, my brother always says, you can't eat an elephant whole. Break it up into manageable chunks and then delegate those down to people who've got the skills to do those specific roles. And if you're not sure who has them roles, ask them. Do surveys, find out who's got the role, because you might find you have an expert within your own team who's got those capabilities.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sajid.
Yeah, just very quickly, we just talked about, you know, in the earlier response about leaders being empathetic. I put quite empathetic to the fact that, you know, people are going through these challenging times. And I think in their one-to-ones that they have, they need to spend considerable time and actually allocate some time to talk about the employee first, what his personal, you know, challenges, and give the assurance that whatever nature of the challenges, they are ready to support and give that comfort. And the second part of the question is about how do you know, still maintain that bond connecting digitally. I understand the challenge, but I think if once we have that emotional intelligence, although nothing can replace that face-to-face thing, but if you once you have that emotional intelligence, it can help you bridge that gap and still be connected.
Thank you, Sajid. Thank you, Chris. Personally, I have really enjoyed this session because there's been so much to learn. But I'm also conscious of time that we all have. We had 60 minutes, and this has been really wonderful to hear both of you share your experiences and give relevant examples. I'm sure the attendees also have a lot of takeaways from this session. So with that, thank you very much once again for taking out time and having this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll now request Jagjit, Mr. Jagjit Singh Sedo, who's a business relationship manager for ACCA Invest in South Central India, to offer a vote of thanks and close the session, please. Over to you, Jagjit.
Sure. So good afternoon to one and all, respected speakers, all our attendees, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks. I, Jagjit Singh, on behalf of the entire ACCA and QX team, would like to extend a vote of thanks to our speakers for this webinar, Sajid and Chris, for sharing those interesting and useful anecdotes and insights with us on leadership in the new normal. Sajid talked about leadership at all levels. Chris mentioned about having a growth mindset to be able to grow as a leader. And very importantly, what really came out as a common insight from both was around upskilling and reskilling, not just technically, but also digitally. And I'm sure that all our attendees and viewers are enlightened with these very useful takeaways and insights, which I'm sure they would be able to apply in their life to be better leaders and professionals of the future. Special thanks to Rahul for moderating the session so well and navigating this very interesting discussion. I would also like to express my gratitude and thanks to the QX marketing team, Vishal, Rishmita, Siddharth, for all your support and dedication to organize this very interesting webinar discussion today. And last but not the least, I would also like to thank our dear attendees for taking the time to join the webinar and for all your cooperation and patience. I would like to end this webinar with a quote. Great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, but always about the goal. With that, I would like to close the session today and thank everyone for joining in. Goodbye and God bless.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Take care. Stay safe.